When the mayor announced this in 2023, he really had no mandate to call for the dissolution of the park board. When he, ran in 2022, he ran a full slate of park board commissioners on, fixing the park board and making Parks and Recreation better. He never ran on dissolving the park board. So for the government, the provincial government, to agree that this is something that the public needs input on, I really agree with. So I'm happy to see that the public is going to have an input onto the future of the park board and how their Parks and Recreation are governed in Vancouver.
I want to ask you about, what he did run on was, fiscal wisdom. And so when it comes to how much the city council or the city can save once the park board is dissolved, what about that?
He's thrown around some numbers, but I have seen zero backup of where those numbers have come from. Park board commissioners don't make a huge salary, and all of the roles that Parks and Recreation does would still happen. It would just be, instead of an elected board, it would just be another department within the city. So I don't see a huge opportunity for savings. There was a huge efficiency push about 10 years ago that resulted in a lot of the efficiencies that you might see between two organizations that were already found. So there's really not a ton of, I think, savings to be had by getting rid of the elected park board. It would all just get rolled into another city department, and those roles would have to be picked up by city council, who are already incredibly busy.
Why do we still need it?
I talked a little bit about this before, but it's really the separation between city council and park board.
But others are not separated.
True. And I think if we look at the history of Vancouver in terms of how our parks have formed, the park board was created, and it's called the park board because at the time there was only one park. It was Stanley Park.
Right.
So the park board was created to protect Stanley Park from development. So there's arguments on both sides. Everyone says there's no one else has a park board, but is that a reason to get rid of something just because, that's the way everyone else does it? You can go either way on it, but I think the sort of having that second layer of accountability is something that I think Vancouverites have valued in the past. So it's really up to the public to decide of, do they want to roll that into city council and have that be something that city council can decide, or do they like having that second layer of accountability and protection for their parks and recreation spaces?
Yeah, you're doing a good job of letting people make their own decision here, but you ran for Vancouver Park Board. What do you see, personally as a risk here?
The risk, I think, is that we lose some level of democracy over our parks and recreation spaces. If you've ever come to a park board meeting, you'll see we have speakers come out and talk about, fairly minor issues relative to the things that City Council talks about. Things that at City Council would just be a staff decision that would just happen and roll through. We have at the park board, and we discuss and we debate, and people come and speak. There's a higher level of scrutiny and transparency, I think, when we have the park board there to have the public, come and provide their input on decisions that impact them. Because ultimately, Parks and Recreation is, I think, the department that the public is interacting with the most. It's your rinks, your pools, your parks, your community centers. These are the things people use on a day-to-day basis, and people should really have a lot of input and accountability and transparency on the decisions around those things.